Turn my mic up. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. All right, got confirmation. Let's be frank. Thank you for the confirmation. What's going on, bro? Rick Boss. Thank you for the confirmation. What's going on with you, bro? All right, welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 319, Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. All right. That's what's up, Rick Boss. What you hit today? Back, shoulders, legs, push-pull day? What's the deal? Deadlifts? Yeah, that's what's up, Rick Boss. That's what's up, man. Upper body. All right, we're going to get started, man, because I don't want to waste too much time. I know we're starting a bit later than what was scheduled, so I had to go to a National Society of Black Engineers meeting tonight, so go watch some awards get given, some annual updates. So if you want to join the panel, the link will be in the chat. Just make sure you raise your hand so we can advance you to the panel, or else you'll be sitting there for quite some time. All right, first article is from thehill.com. Iranian president asserts, wherever America has gone, terrorism has expanded. Let me get rid of this ad real quick. The Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani, on Tuesday accused the United States of being the main instigator of terrorism in the Middle East. Rouhani's comments in a Fox News interview came in response to President Trump criticizing Iran during a speech at the United Nations General Assembly in New York earlier in the day. Today, America, unfortunately, is the supporter of terrorism in our region. And wherever America has gone, terrorism has expanded in the wake, Rouhani told Fox News' Chris Wallace. The Iranian leader said he was amazed at the interpretations of Mr. Trump visit vis-a-vis terrorism and pointed to the U.S. actions in Syria as an example of what he characterized as terrorism in the Middle East. The country that is present and flying over the airspace of and bombarding the soil of the country of Syria without permission of the government is the United States of America, Rouhani explained to Wallace. During his speech at the United Nations on Tuesday, Trump warned Iran against an escalation of malign activity in the Middle East amid rising tension between the two nations. The United States last week hit Iran's central bank with additional tariffs in response to attacks on Saudi Arabian oil facilities. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia have blamed the attacks, which were claimed by Houthi rebels in Yemen, on Iran. Tehran has denied involvement. The United Nations General Assembly is usually the place where everybody gets together annually to state their mission, purpose, and statement about their nation state. And I thought, I watched it, and I thought Hassan Rouhani went all the way in. He definitely stood his ground and didn't back down and wasn't afraid, even when he didn't have home court advantage. It was going on Thai City, what's going on Complex, what's going on Super Triz. And what's happening here is that Iran is getting stronger by the day, or by the week, I should say. The way they've been able to withstand sanctions is that they've been able to educate their people at a level where they have nuclear development in all types of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and they've been able to build up their military in a way that has not been seen. They spend 1/10 the cost on military expenditures that Saudi Arabia has, and yet they'll level Saudi Arabia at the blink of an eye. So a war is not in Saudi Arabia's favor at all. In fact, their whole entire nation state is very fragile, for lack of a better description. It only takes a few attacks on their refineries and their industrialization, and then their whole entire nation state will collapse overnight. They have almost zero resiliency in regards to a war. Whereas Iran is pretty dug inside their mountains, and their military posture is actually very strong. They've demonstrated what their military capabilities are in Syria and Iraq with the PMU, which is the Popular Mobilization Units, the paramilitary arm of the Iranian government, to go in there and clear out all the terrorists, and they've been able to do so in less than a year. They got them all out of Iraq except for a few cells, and then in Syria they've been able to pound all over the terrorists. They've taken few casualties as well. I think they lose one soldier for every 100 terrorists. So that's actually pretty good numbers. Or it may be like one for every 80, but for all intents and purposes, they've sacrificed very little to gain so much. All right. All right, this next one is from the Wall Street Journal. China taps its private sector to boost its military, raising alarms. Beijing is increasingly tapping private Chinese firms to acquire foreign technology for its military, according to officials in a new report, and a strategy that is prompting calls by leaders in Washington to retool U.S. national security policy. Chinese President Xi Jinping is pressing these companies to bid for defense contracts as part of military-civil fusion drive to upgrade an arms industry long dominated by a handful of inefficient state-run contractors and research institutes. And this is behind the paywall, so I'm not going to read any further. But this makes a lot of sense. China has to keep up innovation-wise with other foreign powers, including that of Russia. So they have to start creating their own indigenous technology, and so far they really have not. Everything that they have, for all intents and purposes, has been copied from somebody or somewhere. Whether you want to talk about their MiG fighter jets that are basically knockoffs of Russia's license copies, or even their tanks. Their tanks are basically just T-72s from Russia. Again, licensed for copy. You talk about even Norinco and their AK-47, their Kalashnikov is basically just a carbon copy of what the Russians already made. So there's a lot of industrialization that needs to take place from a military standpoint that China really has not paid attention to. Or maybe they just didn't have the human resources to do it, but they've been basically 80% of their hardware has been coming from outside of the country. That's a big problem because now you're not as you're not self-sustaining in terms of a military military endeavors. United States, the United States military has their own STEM sector and their own manufacturing sector outside of the private sector. So United States military, especially the Army, is always testing new things, whether it gets put into production or not. The purpose is, the point here is that they're able to actually do something indigenously, whereas other countries like China and Southeast Asian countries like India and whatnot, they can't really develop their own hardware because they really don't have the human capital to do it or the human resources to do it. All right, this next one is from AlJazeera.com. Skipping United Nations General Assembly, Putin and Maduro hold talks in Russia. Venezuelan president heads to Moscow for talks with Russian counterpart, a key ally in his country's political crisis. Leaders from around the world have headed to New York this week to attend the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, but Vladimir Putin and Nicolas Maduro are not among them. Having skipped the annual diplomatic gathering, the presidents of Russia and Venezuela instead held their own talks in Moscow on Wednesday. Putin reiterated his support for Maduro's government, but also highlighted the importance of dialogue between the government and the opposition forces. No doubt, we support the dialogue that you, Mr. President, and your government are having with the opposition forces, Putin said. We believe that any refusal to have dialogue is irrational, harms the country, and only threatens the population's well-being. The two leaders were scheduled to hold a one-on-one meeting before attending a working lunch with other officials to discuss bilateral cooperation, among other issues. Before leaving Venezuela, Maduro has said his agenda included holding meetings with important business groups. No major deals are expected, but Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the implementation of joint projects will be on the agenda. Venezuela has been mired in a deep political crisis since January, when opposition leader Juan Guaido declared himself interim president, arguing Maduro's re-election in May 2018 was illegitimate. Guaido has since been backed by dozens of Western countries and their regional allies. Maduro has accused the opposition of stirring up violence and of attempting a coup with the help of the United States. Russia has been a key ally of Maduro's government during the crisis. It has agreed to restructure Venezuela's sovereign debt of $3 billion and has strengthened its military ties, deploying 2 Russian nuclear-capable strategic bombers to the country last year. Over the summer, Moscow said it wanted to continue facilitating the development of Venezuela's military potential, while the two countries signed an agreement allowing Russia to send military ships to Venezuela. Russia has also provided support for Venezuela's energy sector. According to a report by the Financial Times, Russia's state-owned company, Rosneft, was Venezuela's sole supplier of petrol in June. Meanwhile, Russia has rejected U.S. criticism over its ties with Venezuela and hit out at a number of Washington's anti-Maduro moves, including the opening of a U.S. representative office for Venezuela in Colombia's capital, Bogota. Earlier in September, Maria Zakharova, spokeswoman for Russia's foreign ministry, called on all states with influence to refrain from unilateral steps and to facilitate inter-Venezuelan talks and inclusive dialogue in strict agreement with the Constitution. She also said the U.S. actions were not helping in the efforts to break the political deadlock. How can we talk about restoring constitutional order if everyone who is considered legitimate by Washington is being sponsored by Washington, Zakharova said. So this is key, because what has been said in the past is that Venezuela is going to fall apart. We've heard this many times on YouTube and other forms of social media. Venezuela is going to break. When is Maduro going to leave? Do you see Maduro leaving by 2019? Do you see Maduro leaving? Will he be assassinated? There are all these conspiracy theories about and predictions about where Maduro is going to go. And the reality is, Maduro is going to stay. He's not going anywhere. You might take a flight to Russia, you might take a flight to China, but he's not going anywhere in terms of being overthrown or stepping down. He has no interest in that. Just like Assad was predicted in 2015 that he would fall. It's 2019, he's still standing. Venezuela is not Libya. They're not Iraq either. This is not a flat society where you can run your tanks in there and then overthrow him. That's just not going to happen. It will be an all-out battle between Venezuela and any military power. Venezuela's military might is actually pretty sufficient for defense capabilities. They have a lot of modern hardware and a lot of people that are chavistas that are willing to kill or be killed for the sake of the nation, for the sake of their people. So Maduro meeting with Putin in Moscow is actually a good thing, because he hasn't left the country in quite some time. Probably about 9 months now he hasn't left the country. So him going to Moscow, joint venture projects being put on the table, there's a lot of positive things that's going to come out of all of this. So. All right, this next one is from RT.com. Washington and Warsaw make pact to obstruct Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. U.S. President Donald Trump and his Polish counterpart, Andrzej Duda, have called the Russian gas pipeline to Germany a threat to European energy security. According to a White House statement, the two leaders discussed the possibility of hindering the implementation of the Nord Stream 2 project, which aims to deliver more natural gas from Russia to the EU. Earlier this month, Poland's state-owned energy company, PG&E, said it won't extend the contract for gas supplies with Russian Gazprom after 2022. According to PG&E head Peter Wozniak, Russian gas is overpriced. Under the agreement with Gazprom, Warsaw can actually receive 10.2 billion cubic meters of gas, which is delivered via the Yamal gas pipeline through Belarus. Poland already has a 20-year deal to buy liquid natural gas from the U.S. in a bid to give up Russian gas entirely, despite the fact that American gas is more expensive and is not as reliable in meeting Poland's needs. Warsaw has also inked a number of contracts with American companies to replace Russian supplies. That should make Poland the future center for the re-export of American natural gas in the region. Instead, the U.S. ambassador to Poland, Georgette Masbaka, Poland has become an American puppet and does not have its own policy, fully repeating the words of its elder brother, according to Vladimir Dashabov, the Russian first deputy head of the Federal Council Committee on Foreign Affairs. He told RT that the U.S. and Poland don't have the ability to impede the implementation of Nord Stream 2, adding that the pipeline is necessary to meet the energy needs for Europe. They will not be able to hinder the project, but they will try to slow down the construction. But I think that Western Europe will not accept this, particularly Germany, which is interested in Russian gas. An expert at the International Institute for Humanitarian and Political Research, Vladimir Bruder, echoed Dasbarov, saying Poland has become a country that plays along with Washington and is interested in dividing Europe. All of these are elements of American strategy, where Poland stands out as the main deterrent. It is expected to become a barrier to Russia and provocateur to Germany. If Berlin does not defend its own interests, then it will fall into American foreign policy traps, Bruder told RT. Washington is one of the most vocal critics of the Russian pipeline project. Trump has previously slammed the pipeline as a tremendous mistake. Last week, Gazprom said that the Nord Stream 2 project, which is planned to be finished by the year's end, is 81% complete. The project involves the construction of two pipelines with the total capacity of 55 billion cubic meters of gas per year to extend from the Russian coast to Germany and further on to the other European customers, through the Baltic Sea. Berlin has insisted that the project will help the country meet the growing demand for energy as it phases out coal and nuclear power. The pipeline route has so far been laid through the territorial waters and the exclusive economic zones of Russia, Finland, Sweden, and Germany. Only one remaining stretch of the pipeline to be laid through Danish territorial waters is pending official authorization. So what they want to do is basically take American gas and replace Russian gas for Poland. It would take months to fulfill that sort of suggestion that one is twice as expensive, if not 3 times more expensive because of the shipping costs. And then you factor in that if there is a global conflict that breaks out, Poland is screwed because when it gets cold in the wintertime, which is by early November, um, you're screwed. You're basically at the mercy of the United States government, and Russia will just sleep in their warm beds, and while Warsaw will just freeze to death because they won't be able to have access to energy, which is a foolish move that because Germany wants their energy. Germany is a superpower inside the European Union. In fact, they're the head of the European Union for all intents and purposes. If Germany cannot get their energy and have to sleep in cold beds in the wintertime, they're not going to be too happy with Poland, and they'll strike back at Poland. It won't be the first time, and it won't be the last time that they invade Poland. Poland does not have the ability to withstand a conflict on two sides. One, you're dealing with the Russians by cutting their energy to Europe off, and then number two, German beds and French beds going cold in the wintertime is not going to be too happy. It's going to be a lot of wee wees and bratwurst being tossed at Poland. So it's a very stupid idea. We got 30 people watching, only 24 likes. Please hit the like button if you're not going to participate in the chat, please. All right, next one is from Newsweek.com. Russian defense chief says U.S. could cut military budget if it stopped attacking other nations. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has suggested that the huge U.S. military budget could be cut if American foreign policy was less aggressive. In an interview with Russian newspaper Moskovsky Cosmonauts published on Sunday, Shoigu said Russian armed forces were more concerned with defense of the country rather than the force projection, and would prioritize weapons to level the playing field with the U.S. military. Russian President Vladimir Putin has overseen a significant increase in the nation's military budget, seeking to modernize the armed forces and become a world leader in military technology. This country now has the sixth highest military expenditure in the world at some $61.4 billion in 2018, though it still lags far behind the U.S.'s $649 billion. The below chart from Statista shows the relative military spending of various nations. So we see the United States ahead at $648.8 billion, China at $250 billion, Saudi Arabia at $67.6 billion, India at $66.5 billion, France $63.8 billion, Russia at $61.4 billion, the United Kingdom at $50 billion, Germany at $49 billion, Japan at $46 billion, South Korea at $43 billion. But Shoigu argued that Russian military spending is proportionate to the country's foreign policy goals. The U.S. spends huge amounts of money on private military contractors, on aircraft carriers. He told the Moskovsky cosmonauts. Does Russia really need to have 5 to 10 aircraft carrier strike groups, considering that we do not intend to attack anyone? He asked. Instead, the defense chief said Russia would be investing in the means we could use against the enemy's carrier strike groups should our country come under attack. They are far less costly and more efficient. Shoigu argued that the enormous U.S. military budget, given a further boon under U.S. President Donald Trump, was helping to fuel disastrous conflicts worldwide, in which of the nations they went to bring democracy did democracy flourish, he asked. Was that Iraq, Afghanistan, or Libya? And one certainly cannot forget about sovereignty and independence after American involvement. Russian officials have been consistently critical of U.S. and Western military interventions in foreign nations. However, the Kremlin has itself directed several military and hybrid campaigns against its neighbors and rivals. Moscow has repeatedly meddled in the domestic affairs of its neighboring nations in an attempt to maintain a Russian sphere of influence in Georgia and Ukraine. Most notably, this has taken the form of military action, which has left thousands dead. I find this to be very interesting that they would talk about this because, you know, the United States government is never criticized for what they did in Latin America. You know, they're never criticized for what they did in the Caribbean with Grenada. They're never criticized for their campaigns in the Middle East. Somehow, some way, it's only Russia that should be looked at and not the United States. You have the United States right now occupying Syria. You have the the Israelis occupying Palestine and parts of Lebanon. You also have Britain occupying parts in South America, namely the Scilly Island down there that belongs to Argentina, and Diego Garcia, and Guam, and various other places that really do not belong to the United States at all, and yet in their Western allies, and no one seems to have a problem with that. They seem to be okay with the United States doing it because it's in their just right. But when it comes to Russia in Ukraine or in Crimea or in Georgia, somehow, some way, they're wrong for being there. Even though you can trace back Russian history in those areas thousands of years, you can't say the same thing about the United States being in Syria. There is no U.S. Constitution that traces back 2,000, 3,000 years into Syria. In fact, the United States is one of the youngest countries on the map right now. But when you believe in this sort of hegemony of white supremacy, you're willing to go along to get along. Hey, what's going on, Nicole?
Hey, man. I'd also like to say, along with white supremacy, American exceptionalism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, remember that's a big part of this as well.
Absolutely.
And that plays deeply into the into the hands of this whole idea that America can literally criticize other countries for somewhat of what they do, but not speak about, you know, some of the things that we've done. And some of the stuff has been really, really bad. But since we're America, and you know, we are the leader of the free world. We're an exceptional type of nation. You know, these things, you know, don't really matter, or they're just, you know, footnotes and kind of small or relatively small issues that can easily be forgotten in our hegemony. But yet other countries and other nations, or however you want to look at it, or other powers, certainly are a lot more pernicious, definitely more violent and so forth, and they're a lot worse. But American exceptionalism plays into that, and that goes hand in hand with the kind of the white supremacy piece. I think, yeah, you just brought up American exceptionalism.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, this next one is from the Atlantic.com. Benjamin Netanyahu is no longer Israel's indispensable leader. The Likud party headquarters is an ugly 16th floor office block in the unfashionable end of the city's downtown. Its relative distance from the taller towers means it's visible from afar, though during election season, the sides of the building are covered by billboards exhorting the public to vote Likud. A few weeks before Israel's latest election, the second this year, which once again resulted in a political deadlock, the posters went up, this time featuring photographs of Benjamin Netanyahu, Likud's longtime leader and Israel's prime minister for the past decade. Standing beside different world leaders, Vladimir Putin, Modi, and Donald Trump. The inference was clear. Netanyahu was a diplomatic asset, and replacing him was unthinkable. This, in essence, has been Netanyahu's strategy since he began his public career 37 years ago, honed through a careful reading of both American and Israeli politics, or rather the interaction between them. Yet Netanyahu will not be representing Israel at the United Nations General Assembly this week, nor will he be meeting with Trump, seeking to play up his role as Israel's essential leader. In fact, that strategy, pushing his indispensability and his relationship with Trump in particular, is a principal reason he just lost the most important election of his life. Netanyahu's political career didn't actually start in Israel. It began in the United States, where he spent 6 years as an Israeli diplomat, first as number 2 at the embassy in Washington, then as Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. Usually for a diplomat, Netanyahu, then in his 30s, was covered extensively by both the Israeli and American media. The younger brother of a dead hero, Netanyahu courted not just the Israeli press contingents in Washington and New York, but American journalists too. His profile opened doors for him in the Reagan administration, and when Ronald Reagan ordered an airstrike against Libya in April 1986. Netanyahu, who had argued that Western nations should target countries harboring terrorists, and who was touted as an expert on counterterrorism, was viewed as a visionary. An excerpt from a volume he edited on terrorism appeared in Time magazine with his name on the cover. The folks at home were impressed. Each of the ambassadors' visits to Israel involved a procession of adoring interviews. One Israeli tabloid predicted that within a decade, Netanyahu would be Likud's candidate for prime minister. But it wasn't through his diplomatic triumphs that Netanyahu came to understand the role the U.S. plays in Israeli politics. It was through his first big failure, his relationship with Bill Clinton. In April 1988, Netanyahu resigned from the Foreign Service to compete for a spot on Likud's election slate. Already a national celebrity, he was a shoo-in and served as deputy foreign minister in the Likud government formed after those polls. Within 5 years, he was Likud's leader. By 1996, he was Israel's youngest ever prime minister. In every campaign for the Likud state, or the Likud slate, for the party leadership and for prime minister, his success as a diplomat, his forceful UN speeches and media interviews, and his close relationships with American and other global leaders were main selling points. For Israelis who had long felt that they were getting a raw deal on the world stage, it was compelling stuff. But once off the campaign trails and in office, Netanyahu's grandstanding was less effective. In July 1996, as he was preparing for his first visit to the U.S. as a prime minister, he shunned diplomatic protocol and forbade the embassy in Washington from holding any preparatory meeting with American counterparts. It was unnecessary, he argued, and he and Clinton would deal leader to leader. The meeting was a failure. Clinton later fumed to his aides, who the fuck does he think he is? Who's the fucking superpower here? It didn't help that Clinton had admired Netanyahu's predecessors, uh, Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, and had backed them in their attempts to make peace with the Palestinian leadership. Clinton was determined to cajole Netanyahu into continuing their work, despite Netanyahu's fierce opposition. Clinton, who had made frequent visits to Israel and engaged with the locals, was highly admired by Israelis. His frequent and open displeasure with Netanyahu damaged the prime minister's domestic standing. Netanyahu kept flying to Washington in the belief that he could personally mend relations. He never succeeded, and in May 1999, lost an election. Netanyahu learned a valuable lesson. How Israelis felt about the American president determined how they viewed their own leader. He scraped back into office in 2009, but the American president, Barack Obama, had a radically different set of values from Netanyahu's, and the two men were diametrically opposed on policy. Netanyahu wanted the U.S. to ramp up economic pressure and military threats on Iran, and to put the Palestinian issue on the back burner. Obama sought to engage with the Iranian leadership while pressuring Israel to make concessions to the Palestinians. Luckily for Netanyahu, though, the Israeli electorate felt similarly uncomfortable with Obama. He had visited Israel twice before being elected president and had professed an admiration for our strongest ally in the region and its only established democracy. But he had also made it clear that being pro-Israel didn't necessarily mean you adopt an unwavering pro-Likud approach. And his expressions of disappointment at settlement building had many Israelis feeling distrust and antipathy. Instead of engaging with Israelis as Clinton had, Obama left Israel off the itinerary on his first visit to the region. The Israeli leader figured that if he couldn't boast of his personal intimacy with an American leader, the next best thing would be to spin diplomatic confrontations as an enmity to Israel, or even anti-Semitism. Instead of showing himself getting along with the leader of the world's only superpower and Israel's strategic ally, Netanyahu weaponized his personal confrontation with Obama. Obama hates us. Luckily, we still have our friends in Congress to rely on. And with
Hey, can I say something real quick, Mike?
Go ahead.
I don't know if this article goes into it, but Obama helped them also to get the Iron Dome and helped to develop the Iron Dome for Israel. That also really helped to protect them from foreign attacks, from bombs and incoming artillery fire, if you will. So they want to sit back and say that Obama was against him. I mean, I personally think Netanyahu was racist, but they never seem to really talk about that. And I hopefully maybe the article might cover this as well. I would like to hear if they do.
Yeah. Obama hates us. Luckily, we still have friends in Congress to rely on, was the standard message of Netanyahu's advisors in those years. In the Netanyahu supporting sections of the Israeli media, the president was often described as Hussein Obama and as an anti-Semite, despite the fact that American military aid to Israel continued to increase during his time in office. Netanyahu's domestic rivals accused him of ruining the strategic relationship, but the prime minister went on to win 2 more elections during Obama's presidency, presenting himself as the only man who could stand up to the president. In the 2013 campaign, one of his campaign videos was titled, When Netanyahu Speaks, the World Listens, with clips of speeches to the United Nations General Assembly and to a joint session of Congress. In one instance, in March 2015, 2 weeks before an election in which he was trailing in the polls, he flew to Washington to once again address Congress at the invitation of House Speaker John Boehner. Side note, this guy is a traitor. He's treasonous for even inviting a foreign president or a foreign leader into their land to undermine the president of the United States. To speak against Obama's key foreign policy achievement, the Iran nuclear deal, it was an unheard of breach of protocol. To no foreign leader had ever appeared in Congress to oppose the president's policies. Yet Netanyahu wasn't there to convince any American officials. He was speaking to voters back home. He went on to win the election by a handy margin. From the moment Trump was elected, Netanyahu was quick to present himself as an old friend. This was an exaggeration. The two had been introduced in Manhattan during Netanyahu's ambassador days and had remained in touch. Yet in Trump, Netanyahu was dealing with a kindred spirit, someone who, like the Israeli leader, personalized diplomacy, inserted himself into international relations, took credit for any breakthrough, real or imagined, shunned professionals, diplomats. The U.S. ambassador to Israel is David Friedman, Trump's bankruptcy lawyer, his most intimate confidant, and the man who probably knows the president's financial affairs best. On the other side, Israel's ambassador to Washington, Ron Dermer, is Netanyahu's closest advisor. The Dermer-Friedman nexus bypasses the State Department and Israeli Foreign Ministry. It's peak personal diplomacy. Netanyahu has met with Trump 8 times since he became president, more than with any leader outside of the G7. When those meetings are added to ones in the past, Netanyahu is easily the world leader Trump knows best. Early on, the relationship paid off for Netanyahu. Israel was on the itinerary for Trump's first foreign trip after his election. The administration also ended U.S. support for a Palestinian state, and it moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem and withdrew from the Iran deal. Then, just 2 weeks before this year's first Israeli election, Netanyahu arrived in Washington to receive Trump's ceremonial recognition of the contested Golan Heights as part of Israel. The timing was deliberate. When Netanyahu's alliance of right-wing and religious parties seemed to win the election soon after, Trump was quick to call to offer congratulations. But as Netanyahu struggled to piece together a coalition government and then had to call a second election, Trump's warmth fizzled. Netanyahu tried to rekindle the romance, naming a settlement on the Golan Trump Heights in honor of the president's birthday. The show of sycophancy elicited an appreciative tweet. Trump tweeted again a few weeks later, congratulating Netanyahu on breaking David Ben-Gurion's record as Israel's longest-serving prime minister, but that was it. In recent months, Dermer has frantically tried to secure another election gesture for Netanyahu. Yet the president has instead expressed interest in engaging with Tehran and meeting with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, a step even Obama didn't take. Trump finally came through days before the election with a phone call, a tweet, and a vague promise to discuss a mutual defense pact, but it was too late. On election day, Netanyahu went online in a desperate last-hour video and fell back on his diplomatic exploits. All the battles I fought against a president of the United States and my other battles in Congress And at the United Nations, I did it for you, he begged in a hoarse voice. And now I'm asking you for something small to go to the polling station. It's only a 5-minute walk. Later that night, he refused to concede defeat and instead called to form a strong Zionist government, invoking my friend President Trump, whose plan of the century will be presented soon. Netanyahu, having lost an election, was still arguing he was Israel's indispensable statesman. Trump did not call this time, and Netanyahu's office announced he would not be attending the United Nations General Assembly. Hours later, Trump told reporters in Los Angeles, "Look, our relationship is with Israel. We'll see what happens." Of all people, Trump had dumped Netanyahu's brand of professional politics. No more gestures would be coming. Many factors led to Israel's voting against Netanyahu last week. But when the story of the final days of the leadership is written, it will be remembered that Netanyahu built his political strategy around whoever was in the Oval Office. And when Netanyahu needed the president's support most, he was abandoned. Well, he did it to himself. He's a very feverish sort of person. Obama felt the same way about him. Obama said on a hot mic moment, he said, "I can't stand this dude," and I think it was John Kerry who says, "You no, it wasn't John Kerry. It was Sarkozy, I think." Actually, it was President Hollande who said, "You don't like him. I can't stand him." So we know that Netanyahu is not liked in many circles, and we know that Israel only has so much time left before they actually are forced to make concessions with the Palestinians. So we know, based on this article, that Obama was working to actually get concessions for the Palestinians. We also know that Clinton was also pushing for concessions with the Palestinians. Despite all of the flaws that those two presidents had, we know that Jimmy Carter also pushed for concessions with the Palestinians. So we see this sort of democratic, left-leaning, liberal approach to diplomacy from a foreign policy perspective, and putting the Palestinians' needs over Israel, or at least trying to make a concession, is actually admirable, in my opinion. But in terms of Netanyahu, he wants to be this sort of, I guess, monarchy. He wants the Likud party to be a monarchy, where the Likud party is Israel, and Israel has to look to the Likud party, and that should never be the case. It would be the equivalent of only having Republicans in office, and you get to choose David Duke 9 times out of 10. Who the hell would stand for something like that? You all can jump in at any time.
All right, who else is on here with us?
DE Raptor.
Mike, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Well, as far as the Likud party, and its extremist views, they've been that way for a while. It looks. I think we've gone over a lot of these issues with Israel for a while, and I think they're doing a lot of posturing right now, to hold some political power in Israel. But I do think that the Likud party and a lot of their stances are not as popular. They're not as popular. I think a lot of what they're claiming that they want and still expanding and grabbing more settlements and all that is not going to be that popular. And I see that's starting to wane. I see these guys kind of on their way out. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now. And that's kind of what I'm hearing on the ground. From reports coming definitely out of Israel. So I know they're doing a lot of talking right now, a lot of posturing, but I think their days are numbered.
Nago, you're right about that. Under Netanyahu, you've never seen a prime minister before him. I have never seen a prime minister before him go after individual world leaders like Netanyahu did. He went after the Labour Party in England that used to support him. I mean, anything that Netanyahu did, that Israel did, the Labour Party agreed with. I mean, here in America, the Democratic Party and the Republicans, Christian people, they supported Israel no matter what they did. Jewish people in America, before Netanyahu, they complained a little bit, but they supported Israel.
Some of that
under Netanyahu now, that some people are beginning to say, Netanyahu, you're wrong.
That's exactly right.
I mean, I've never seen that before, and
That's
I mean, it brought joy to my heart because I could see some of the things that, I won't want to go personal on this, but it brought joy to my heart that I see other people, other people say, hey, you're wrong. And when I saw that at first, it kind of stunned me. I was like silent, but now I'm beginning to feel happy about it. And now with this election, I see that it was even more widespread, that he had done more damage. People had begun to see that what he was doing was actually damaging the image of Israel everywhere on the planet. And after he discovered that he was doing it, you see him run to the African Union to try to get a seat. South America, he was trying to get into every government in South America, support Israel, pushing them, blackmail, and then wherever he had to do to get their support, to get them to support him personally, not just Israel, but him personally.
And see, you bring up really good points. And one of the key, not only the African Union and so forth, which was going on in Europe, but really he's starting to have some fractured support. It's fracturing his support here in America, especially in the American Jewish community, which is problematic. Very problematic for those guys. They've taken some very extreme views, and there have been incidents that have happened here in the United States where we can go back last year in Pittsburgh, I think, where they bombed that synagogue and killed those Jews and all of that. Then you've got these Jews taking very far right-wing positions, but in Israel behind the party, and you see Jews now starting to look around and say, hold on one second, look at this. We'll be seeing more of this, and maybe the positions that are being taken by the Israelis, Israel is not really to our overall, interests, especially Jews in the diaspora. So problematic, the Likud party, very, very problematic, starting to fracture a lot of support. And there's no question about it. Jewish Americans here are not all in the same, they're all not walking in lockstep up behind this. And I think that's the biggest problem. The AIPAC and everything else comes out of here, and we talk about money and dollars and so forth. So there's a lot. This is big problem. I think, as the party is starting to lose some power, I think this is Netanyahu's last go round. He's done. He's out. I think he's definitely finished.
When I saw Jewish people, you know what I'm telling you? Start supporting the boycott and divest movement. Not only just lip service, but with their dollars. Not just Palestinians with their dollars. Jewish people supporting the boycott and divest movement. It was, at first I was saying, you know what they have to gain out of this. But now I'm seeing that it's really, a lot of them is from their heart because they can see that something is wrong. And they're saying, you know what? We can't accept this. The world is changing and we have to change too. And I agree with them. I totally agree with them.
Hey, Mike, you seem to work with the Palestinian groups as well over there in your area. Are you hearing some of the same things, or kind of what's some of the sentiments that you're getting?
It's a mixed bag. So basically, it's all lip service until they see some any actionable items on the ground. You are right in your assessment that Western Jews are actually starting to push back against the state of Israel. This is a big problem for Israel because they're losing their brand, their commercial branding or their political branding, and people are starting to basically tell them go screw. This idea that you can just basically label anybody anti-Semitic because they don't agree with Israel. That's not holding weight anymore. In Africa, on the continent, they don't actually have an anti-Semitism law. No country has that on the continent. So the idea of you can't speak out against Israel is unheard of on the continent. So what happens here is Palestinians have lots of support. They should have more, but due to their own blunders politically under the PLO, they chose the West over Africa, and that caused a bit of a mix-up. But to answer your question, what's happening on the ground, the murmurs that we're having, we're actually going to have a Palestinian rally on Friday night, so we'll probably be late for the economics hangout. But there's going to be some solidarity going on Friday, and people are definitely Jews are definitely showing up. There's a lot of Jews showing up to support the rally. So, all right, let me get to this next article from BBC.com. Haiti senator opens fire outside Parliament, wounding 2. I don't know, man. This dude right here, man, looks like some guy in the manosphere, man, with a goat. I could be wrong though.
Serious. I can't see how a senator in Haiti can't see what is happening to his own people on the street and try to do something about it. I mean, even if you got the wealth, you know what I'm saying? You got the wealth and
Can I read the article?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sherry Di Nialo, a photographer with the Associated Press, was hit in the face. Leon LeBlanc, a security guard, was also wounded in the incident. Senator Jean-Marie Ralph Fateh opened fire as he left Parliament in the capital, Port-au-Prince. He claimed he was defending himself from protesters. Mr. Diao Nalio, who was wearing body armor clearly marked with the word press, was struck on the chin. Reports said he was treated in the hospital, but his injuries were not severe. Mr. LeBlanc's condition was not immediately known. That's crazy. Mr. Fatir, a senator from the north, told local media he had attempted to defend himself after armed individual threatened me. I was attacked by violent militant groups, so I defended myself, he told Haiti's Radio Mega, adding self-defense is a sacred right. Another senator, Patrice Dumont, told local media that Mr. Fatir issued a warning before opening fire. Protesters had gathered outside the building as the Haitian Senate met to confirm Fritz William Mitchell as the new prime minister. Crippling fuel shortages have triggered weeks of anti-government protests, plunging the country into an economic and political crisis. Soaring inflation and allegations of government corruption have compounded Haiti's woes, leading to calls for Jovenel Moise, president since 2017, to stand down. So it, I don't know if it's in the water or what. I mean, you got politicians running around with blickies, closing their eyes and shooting, not knowing where they're shooting at. Crazy. All right, this next one is from NewYorkPost.com. 3 Navy sailors assigned to USS George H.W. Bush killed themselves in a week. Three Navy sailors assigned to USS George Herbert Walker Bush aircraft carrier killed themselves last week in separate incidents, officials said Monday. The commanding officer of the carrier, which is docked at Norfolk Naval Shipyard in Virginia, announced the deaths in a post on the ship's Facebook page Monday. It is with a heavy heart that I can confirm the loss of 3 sailors last week in a separate, unrelated incident from apparent suicide. My heart is broken, Captain Sean Bailey wrote in an announcement. None of these deaths occurred on the carrier, which is docked at the shipyard for repairs. The crew members who killed themselves last week are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th sailors assigned to the ship to commit suicide in a 2-year period. Bailey urged sailors on the carrier to come forward with suggestions on how to put an end to the string of suicides. We need all hands to engage by bringing forward your suggestions and ideas for how we can work together to prevent another suicide, he wrote in the post, adding, I want to reiterate that there is never any stigma or repercussion from seeking help. Interesting. 5 and 2 years? I don't know. Maybe it's in the water or something, but you can easily go through their web history and kind of figure out what's really going on.
This problem is not only confined to the Navy, man. Last month, the Air Force, they shut down operations. One base shut down operations for 3 days to deal with the suicide problems. And I heard from people, some bases that I know people, and they have 3, 4, 5 people in the last 6 months that have taken their own lives. So this is it. And the thing is that we are not in an active, really. Well, yeah, we are at war, yeah, but it is not. We are not in the type of war that we had like when Obama came into office. Where Iraq and we pulled out of Syria. A lot of our people are out of Afghanistan. Most of the people are out of Iraq now. But people are still killing themselves. There's got to be some kind of problem that is endemic to the system that's
Cheating
causing
wives,
them to do that.
cheating wives.
Well, part of that could be part of the problem too, but in that case, it will have to be the upper echelon. Can't be airmen, and a lot of people that kill themselves are the lower echelon. You know, the cheating wife thing is one. I don't say not only the lower echelon guys. A lot of the guys who have wives and live on base and so forth and go off to leave their wives are kind of like getting into the NCO rank, sergeant and above. A lot of guys who are not married are airmen. You know, one stripe, two stripes. You know, um, like my son, for instance, he is not married. He's got two stripes. My cousin, you know, he wasn't married when he was in the army. He was a 101. But the stress that is put on them, it seems like it's overly so. Even though we are not in a war footing, you know.
All right. This next one is from Bloomberg.com. Iran says it will hold naval drill with Russia and China soon. Iran said it will stage a naval drill with Russia and China in international waters after the U.S. announced plans to send troops to the Middle East, according to TASNIM, a semi-official news agency. The joint drill will be held in the north of the Indian Ocean and the Sea of Oman, TASNIM said, citing Ghadir Nizami, head of international affairs and defense diplomacy at Iran's General Staff of the Armed Forces. We have made no plans whatsoever to hold a drill in the Persian Gulf. This is behind a paywall, so we won't be able to finish this. But this sends a clear message that Iran has the ability to work with other superpowers to actually train to defend itself. I'd be very concerned if I was the British sending those warships up into the Straits of Hormuz, because the British lack any sort of blue water navy to defend itself against a conflict. It gets involved with Iran. Most of their ships are pretty decrepit, and their HMS aircraft carrier has seen many problems. They have a morality problem as well. They can't get enough people to join, so they're going out to Africa and the Caribbean to go find new, fresh recruitments to join the British Navy and join the British military. And I don't think the United States wants to get into a fight with three different countries like Iran, Russia, and China if they've been training in the way that they have been training.
Well, if you want to integrate like what they're planning on doing, then they're gonna have to do a lot more exercises together. Because right now the Iranians and the Russians are coordinating their efforts in Syria Syria, yes. But you have to that's only on a small scale. If they're gonna have some kind of effort to bring peace to the area that they're working in, then including the Pakistanis and everybody else, going to have to get involved in that coordinated effort, joint military effort.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if if you see Turkey in there one one day, and Turkey and Egypt too.
Well, Egypt and Turkey would never get along because of the Muslim Brotherhood, but
Oh.
you will see they did have India and Pakistan as a part of the operation. So from the full article, so um, it does sound like there's something bigger that they have that they perceive as looming over their heads coming soon. So
Yeah,
right,
the Chinese and the Russians are building a military front.
mm-hmm,
You know, and right now Iran and India are kind of like in observer status, and as soon as they get integrated, then the whole thing will get set up.
mm-hmm. All right, this next one is from the aviationgeekclub.com. Russian S-300 and S-400 air defense systems are unable to detect Israeli F-35s flying over Syria. Or are they? Russian S-300 and S-400 air defense systems are unable to detect Israeli Air Force F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters flying over Damascus. The Israeli news outlet NZIV citing a number of military sources published the flight route of the Israeli stealth fighters that struck eastern Syria. As it turned out, the IAF F-35s not only entered the Syrian airspace, but also flew for almost several hundred kilometers over the area covered by Russian S-400 and Syrian S-300 air defense systems. Noteworthy, also Russian fighters didn't attempt to intercept Israel's F-35s. This may suggest that Russian stealth detection system failed or did not work properly. According to NZIV, another strike carried out by the IAF aircraft puts in question the effectiveness of Russian air and missile defense systems, since the two other Israeli warplanes were able to enter the Syrian airspace without any hindrance. Given the fact that Russia has previously warned Netanyahu of its readiness to respond adequately, it seems that the Russian air defense system simply did not notice Israeli warplanes. As recently reported by Avia.pro, that cited an anonymous source, Russia has allowed Syria to use the S-300 missile defense system against Israeli warplanes. In spite of a previously reached agreements between Russia and Israel, and because of the recent ramping up of Israeli strikes on Syrian territory, the source claimed that the Syrian military received permission to use its air defense system in the event of the slightest threat from Israel, provided that the Syrian side bears responsibility for such actions. Russia has allowed the Syrian military to bring the S-300 to full combat readiness and attack Israeli aircraft in the event of a slightest threat, the source said. Information regarding this appeared a day after Israeli F-35 fighter jets struck targets in Syria, completely ignoring Moscow's position on the issue. I want to say that these radars are put in passive mode in the signature map that they would use to identify an F-35 fighter jet. It's not showing up because it's not set in active mode. It's set in passive mode. If it's set in passive mode, it's on, but it's not looking for anything. Am I correct in my assessment, D.E. Raptor?
You could be right in that, but I'm looking at this more as the Russians are allowing that aircraft to fly, observing it, and see its capabilities. Because America is presenting that aircraft as its line of defense, its front line, that nobody can touch it. And the Russians are really not just observing it and not showing their own capabilities in it. That's what my opinion, and that's what militaries do. Because um, Russians there to help the Syrians retake their territory. The Israelis are not stopping that progress. They
Mhm.
might be attacking here and there, but they're not hindering the Syrians from really retaking Syrian territory that they're going after. That process is still ongoing. But in the meantime, those the Israelis are going nowhere near Russian bases or Russian people. They're not affecting the Russian movement anyway.
Mhm.
So the Russians are observing them, and that's what I would do if I was a Russian, because I'm not threatened. I would observe them, and I will kind of recalibrate. They can recalibrate the S300. You can, I mean, electronics are really easy to recalibrate. You can change it. Once you identify a target, um, once you identify that aircraft, then you can reprogram your system to look for that signature.
Mhm.
That's what the electronics part of this missile does. And once you put that signature, once you identify the signature to the missile now gonna be looking for that. Your radar paints it,
Mhm.
and your missile locks onto it, and will track it until it destroy it.
And plus,
So you,
they
so
eh, eh,
reprogramming your electronics is the basic element. That's what I would do. If I bought the S300, I would take it, improve the electronics on it, and use it, because that's what S400 is: improve radar signature identification.
mhm. Yeah, and I would also add in that the Russians must have an AWACS system in Syria, watching over all of Syria to actually get an idea of where their what activity is happening in the airspace.
Yeah, everything that takes off out of Israel, they will see.
Hmm.
So you have to have that. It's like the U.S. They fly those AWACS 24/7. You know?
All right, this next one is from CNN.com. Exclusive. Zarif threatens all-out war in case of military strike on Iran. Iran's foreign Iran's foreign minister has warned of an all-out war in the event of U.S. or Saudi military strikes against his country, and questioned whether Saudi Arabia was prepared to fight to the last American soldier. Javad Zarif told CNN that Iran hoped to avoid conflict, adding that the country was willing to talk to its regional rivals, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, but Iran would not hold talks with the U.S. unless Washington provided full relief from sanctions as promised under the 2015 nuclear deal, Tehran's top diplomat said. He again denied that Iran was involved in weekend attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities, which dramatically ratcheted up tensions in the region. Zarif said Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels who claim responsibility for the attack have stepped up their military capabilities and were capable of conducting a sophisticated operation such as the one that knocked out half of the kingdom's energy production. Probe further, however, Zarif was unable to provide proof that Houthis launched the drones and missiles. I cannot have any confidence that they did they did it because we just heard their statement, said Zarif. I know that we didn't do it. I know that the Houthis made a statement that they did it. U.S. and Saudi officials have repeatedly dismissed Houthi claims of responsibility in the weekend attacks. Instead, they have pointed the finger at Iran. At the news conference on Wednesday, Saudi Ministry of Defense spokesman Turki Malik Malki said weapons that missed their targets were found to be Iranian made. He also said the investigations revealed that the drones and missiles were likely launched from the north of the kingdom and not from the direction of Yemen, which lies southwest of the country. War drums have become louder since the attack. U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Pentagon officials to plan potential responses. He tweeted that the U.S. was locked and loaded, but was waiting for Saudi Arabia's rulers to decide on a path forward. I don't know, man. You have these Patriot missile batteries inside your country, but they weren't able to detect low-flying, unsurfaced, unmanned vehicles. I just find that to be very interesting. And you're saying that it came from across the water from Iran? Really?
If those missiles came across the water, U.S. has enough assets in the area to see everything coming over. There won't be a ship. There won't be a ship on that area that won't go on alert that night. I can tell you.
Well, I mean, you should be able to hear these missiles being fired off into your country as well, because we know that Saudi Arabia spent money on military, and that includes satellites. Um, were your satellites down that day? Was it cloudy? What happened?
Yeah, but our AWACS aircraft, the Navy has P3s and 737s that are always looking down on that area, and they have other assets, because they flew one over Iran and Iran shot it down supposedly, brought it down electronically. They always have those things in the air, so they're gonna see everything that comes off the ground in Iran,
That's a good point.
everything. So if the only way the two things that if they ignore it because they wanted the Saudis to get hit, or if they're looking in the other direction, they're looking at Iran and the weapons came from off the opposite direction.
Right. Right. And where was UAE in their satellite in their radar detection that there were missiles coming from either Iran or Yemen in their own backyard? How come they didn't have a signature map or some kind of radar detection picking that up? They should know. They have just as much military might as Saudi Arabia does. All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from BBC.com. Iran warns it will destroy aggressors after U.S. troop announcement. I think we just read this. Yeah, we just read this. All right, this one is from Newsweek.com. Russia warns U.S. after military claims it can take down air defenses. All plans look good until a battle begins. Russia has hit back after the United States military claimed it could take down advanced air defenses in Kaliningrad region and reportedly practiced doing so earlier this year. General Jeff Harrigan, commander of U.S. Air Forces in Europe, told reporters that this month that if we have to go in there to take it down, for instance, the Kaliningrad IADS integrated air defense system, let there be no doubt we have a plan to go after that, according to Breaking Defense. He added, we train to that. We think through those plans all the time. And if that would ever come to fruition, we'd be ready to execute. While the top officials did not go into details, he said such an operation would be a multi-domain, very timely and effective. The National Interest published a follow-up piece Thursday citing a previous exercise in which independent imagery analyst Stephen Watkins said B-52 strategic bombers carried out a mock missile attack on Kaliningrad in March. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova responded Friday, calling Harrigan's words a threat and absolutely irresponsible as Moscow reacted with outrage. The Russian diplomat told a press conference that the U.S. comments were indicative of how easy it is for political elite, and particularly the United States, to deal with such serious and very complex issues as world security and stability, acting in a responsible manner on the basis of political and market considerations, including, as we understand, its own electoral process. The main thing is that all of this is an indicator of not only irresponsibility but also stupidity, she added. Smart, far-sighted people who truly express the interests of the people who appoint or elect them to their respective positions will never make such statements, realizing that they cause reputational damage to the country they represent. She then referred to reporters to the Russian Defense Ministry, which issued its own statement arguing that Russia's Kaliningrad region is well protected from any aggressive plans being developed in Europe by visiting American generals. According to the ministry's official news outlet, Zavista, the ministry argued that air defense deployed to the Baltic exclave could track and neutralize any incoming jets by the U.S.-led NATO Western Military Alliance. This fully applies to the invisible fifth-generation American fighters, which are invisible only for American taxpayers and foreign buyers. The ministry added, noting NATO member Turkey's decision to risk its F-35 purchase by acquiring Russia's advanced S-400 surface-to-air missile system. The statement said Harrigan's words should cause concern for U.S. Soldiers as all plans look good until a battle begins. Kaliningrad Governor Anton Alekhnikov also spoke out against the remarks, telling the state-run TASS news agency that we are not going to be engaged with invitations, but we certainly have no fear, he added. We host the Baltic Fleet's main base. Given the morale and the technical prowess of the troops in Kaliningrad, I wouldn't advise anyone to risk messing with our military. The politician also recommended that all U.S. generals read some history books about those who plotted against the Russian state and the consequences they had to face because the Russian people know how to respond to every American general who has plans. I think history should have taught our partners and opponents a lesson long ago. What we're looking at right here is Russian NATO anti-access aerial denial areas on the map. So we see that Russia air defense and NATO air and missile defense are pretty even, respective to their regions. Kaliningrad is located in Europe's between Poland and Lithuania, the two member countries that most multinational battle groups designed to counter what the 29-member defense pact considered Russian aggression in the region. Relations between Moscow and NATO worsened significantly after Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine and was accused of backing a separatist insurgency in the neighboring countries east amid a political uprising in Kyiv. DE Raptor, any ideas on this before we close out? I guess not. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if you have not already done so, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab, which we posted this week. Go check that out. And also make sure you subscribe to SuperTriz, youtube.com/SuperTriz. That being said,
are we out? I'm sorry, I was on another call, man. I apologize.
Nope, that's fine. Shalom, everyone.